Chapter 31. Thank you. I mumbled to the guard who stood behind me holding my suitcase. He bowed his head wishing me a good day as he handed my suitcase over to me, walking away, leaving me before my room. I let out a soft sigh, opening the doors to the room that had become my own in these past few months. I rolled my suitcase in, collapsing on a large bed, drumming my fingers on my sweater-clad stomach. Alaricus wasn't home yet. A very drowsy Victoria had come to see me at the door. Barefoot, her pregnant belly showing through the beautiful soft-looking green dress she wore. She greeted me with a soft hug, which turned to a sleepy smirk as I asked about Alaricus, her arched eyebrows waggling as she told me he was going to be back early tomorrow morning. Eager to see him, she asked, a malicious smirk covering her beautiful face, making my cheeks turn slightly red as I mumbled a no, asking her how Adrian and Frank were. I've got Adrian hooked onto my nap schedule, so he's currently sleeping, and I think while training Adrian I accidentally trained my husband too. He's currently hugging my jar of peanut butter sleeping, she said, a slightly disgruntled look on her face as I let out a small chuckle at her. I need to get back to sleep because this baby doesn't like Mama being awake during nap time. You're welcome to join us for dinner though. You know, since your regular dining partner isn't here. She says, that soft smirk still on her face as she walked away proudly, leaving me blushing with the guards who stood stoically behind me. I let out a huff, turning over in my bed, not understanding my own irritated mood. Alaricus was supposed to be back by midnight or tomorrow morning, but couldn't he just somehow show up early? Idiotic werewolf. I mumbled to myself as I started to unpack, unable to think of another way to waste time until dinner. Begrudgingly I hung all my clothes up, before grabbing a light blue sweater and black jeans to wear to dinner and going to take a shower. I rubbed my shampoo into my hair, even the hot water and sweet smell of my strawberry and cinnamon shampoo unable to help soothe my irritated nerves. Stepping out, I towel-dried my hair, slipping on my clothes before blow-drying my hair quickly to rid it of the damp, cold feel. Still mumbling to myself, I walked out of the washroom, sniffling as I sulkily hung my towel over the rack, stumping over to my door as I threw it open, my eyes widening drastically, my pout completely dropping as I caught sight of Honey Eyes framed with thick black lashes on the other side of the hall. The honey in his eyes bright and drastically as he caught sight of me, a smile curving up his plum-red lips, his eyes near sparkling as they raked over my sweater-clad form, a sweet longing clear on his face as he stared at me. He was dressed immaculately as always, a fitted black coat over black pants that hugged his thick muscled legs. His white shirt stretched tightly over the wide expanse of his chest, the white and black contrasting so well with his smooth tanned skin. He dropped his luggage as he made his way over to me, wrapping his arms around me before I could blink, pulling me into his chest. I missed you so much, Angel. He mumbled softly into my hair, inhaling my scent deeply, his arms tight and around my waist as if I wasn't nearly close enough. The heat of his large thumb pressed into my skin, warming me after my shower, making a small smile come over my face as I snuggled into him, wrapping my own arms around him, his intoxicating scent filling my senses, making it hard to think straight. My eyes closed on that own accord as I rested on his chest, unwilling to ever move. You came back. I hear him mumble so softly that I don't think it was meant me for to hear, but it still makes my heart clench. You didn't think I was going to come back. His week must have been dreadful. All the worry, the doubting. My cheek rubbed against the soft hot skin that was exposed atop his dress shirt. My feet slightly lifted as he held me so close. I pulled away slightly to look up at his face. He smiled down at me softly, a dimple popping out on his soft cheek as he leaned down, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Hi, I mumbled to him, unable to contain my smile, and he let out a breathy chuckle. Hello, love. He answered, rubbing his nose against mine, making a soft giggle escape me as I beamed at him. How was your stay? He asked me softly, one of his hands coming to cup my cheek, softly tilting my head up so that he could see my face clearly. It was great. I loved seeing my parents again, and I brought you some of my dad's famous chocolate brownies. I told him softly, and he gazed down at me in adoration as I spoke, his gaze so fixated. He seemed to hang off of every word, making my heart beat faster. But his gaze was home. He was slowly becoming my home. Was your trip successful? I asked, softly frowning as he shook his head at me softly. My success only lies with you, Angel. I missed you terribly. Nothing feels right without you with me. It nearly drove the alphas crazy. I couldn't keep my mind off of you. I'm not very useful without you. He tells me softly, those honey eyes gazing at me so softly. A heart-melting longing in them as he tugs me closer to him, pressing his lips to my forehead. I missed you too. I mumble softly and he freezes, his breath hitching. Why, you missed me, Angel? He asks softly, pulling away from me enough to look clearly into my eyes, his eyes so hopeful, as his gaze takes over my face as if searching to see if I was telling the truth. I bit into my lips, often nodding at him, nearly regretting my words, until that beautiful smile is back on his face as he wraps his arms around me again. I love you so much, Angel. He mumbled, pressing kisses to my hair, inhaling my scent. Ily. You have no idea what it means to me to know you missed me. Even if it wasn't the way that I crave to be near you at all times, even the slightest bit, it means the world to me, Amara. He says softly, pressing a kiss to my head. Eat with me. He asks softly, pulling away to face me. I nod, trying to give him a reassuring smile, and not let him see what his words had done to me. He grabs his suitcase, taking hold of my hand with his other as he walks us into his room. He sits me down onto his bed, gently walking over to his closet. I should tell Victoria and Frank that I won't be eating with them. I say, hesitantly, going to get up, but he turns back to me, clearing the large distance between us way too quickly for my human eyes to catch, startling me as he peers before me. Don't go. I've been away from you for far too long. I need you near me. We need you near us. He says, his eyes glinting gold as he takes a hold of my hands in his gently. I swallow, nervously pressing my other hand over his, rubbing his hand softly in reassurance. Frank saw me come in. I'm sure they'll know. He says, a light smirk on his face as he looks up into my eyes as he kneels before me, making my cheeks tint red. Just let me freshen up, love. The food will be here shortly, he says, pressing a kiss to my hand before walking away from me into the washroom. I inhaled deeply. He always seemed to make me forget the need for oxygen. Alaricus was back in record time, having left the door open to the washroom as he showered, and I turned my head away from it to save his modesty. But he didn't seem determined on saving himself. A soft cream cashmere sweater ladled against his broad chest, the softness of the color making him look all the more exotic, his dark pants hugging his legs, his hair not quite completely dry, making dark strands fall onto his forehead, giving him an adorable homey look that had me unable to look away as he stalked towards me. He leaned down before me, grasping my small hand in his gently. He rested his head in my lap. I pulled my hand away from his gently, and he turned his head to look up at me, a slight pout on his beautiful face making me smile as I leaned down, pressing a kiss to his head, running my fingers through his hair, and he snuggled his head into my lap, like a little wolf pup. How could people ever call this overgrown puppy a beast? How did you get back so quickly? Weren't you supposed to be back tomorrow? I asked, slightly curious, her Victorial eye just to see my reaction. I was going to murder her after she gave birth. I couldn't risk hurting a miniature Adrian. Victoria and Frank babies were too cute. But after she gave birth, I would hunt her down. I left early, he says, simply wrapping his arms around me while I sat on his bed, nuzzling his face deeper into my lap. Did you even resolve the land problem? The decision was clear, but I didn't exactly get to explain it, so one of the alphas absolutely despises me, but that's all right. He says nonchalantly, what do you have against that poor alpha? I ask, laughing. It's not me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He's short and he hates anyone tall. Alaricus says, a crease forming between his brows. Well then, he shouldn't have a problem with you, I say casually, running my hands through his hair, and it takes a second for him to realize what I'd said, and then his head flies up. He simply stares at me as if hoping he'd imagined I said that. I mean, you're pretty small yourself. That's probably not why he doesn't like you, I say, biting my lip to hold in my smile. Alaricus was a giant, but he didn't need to know I thought that. Alaricus stares at me for a moment longer before getting up off his knees, towering over me. His stare is indescribable as he looks down at me silently. I stare back up at him, trying to hold back my smile until I see the mischief in those honey eyes. I look down at my hands for a second to gather my thoughts, but before I can look up again, I see his shoes disappear as Alaricus lunges at me, his arm wrapping around my waist, pulling me gently to the top of the bed. My wrists are pulled up. Alaricus had me pinned down to the bed as he lay stopped me, holding my wrists in one hand, looking down at me. I stare up at him, wide-eyed. His actions, despite how gentle they had been, had knocked the air out of me. My chest nearly touched his with each of my deep breaths as I tried to calm my erratic heartbeat. My heart always did misbehave when he was too close. "Take it back." Alaricus growls playfully, his velvety voice huskier than usual. "Why would I take it back if it's the truth?" I asked, trying to sound confident despite the fact that my heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. "Is it now?" He growls out, his eyes malicious, making me almost regret my decision. Still trying to calm my heart, I didn't notice his hands let go of my wrist and reach for my sides until it was too late. Loud giggles escape me as Alaricus tickles me. He's absolutely relentless, not giving up even when I beg. Say Alaricus is the tallest, broadest, handsomest man out there. Alaricus yells, laughing along with my manic giggles. No. I stutter out, tears now streaming down my face as I struggle under him, laughing, trying to get out of his hold, but his arms are like bars, holding me to him so firmly yet gently. "Say it." He growls out loudly, and I look into his eyes as he stares at me, laughing. That dimple embedded deep in his cheek as he laughs along with me. His honey eyes alight with happiness, gleaming brighter than I'd ever seen them. Never. I stutter out my giggles, messing up my words as I start to become breathless from laughter, my stomach starting to hurt from laughing, and I decide to relent. He stares at me adoringly, soft chuckles escaping him as he leans down closer to me, nuzzling my face with his pulling back a look at me, his fingers slowing at my side. He stares deep within my eyes with his own intense honey gaze. His black thick lashes so long they seem to touch his cheek, and I wonder how they don't ever get tangled. The little air I have in me leaves as he leans ever closer, his weight resting on me very softly. His chest pressed against me, one hand now on his side to lift some of his weight so he doesn't crush me. Alaricus is the broadest. I start softly, hypnotized completely by him, but broken out of my trance as a knock sounds on the door, signaling the food's here. Only as I look towards the door does Alaricus realize the door was knocked upon. He lets out a soft groan, pushing himself so that he lays beside me, and not on top. I go to get up, trying to calm my breath, only to lose it when he grabs my arm, yanking me to him, wrapping his arm around my waist, holding me firmly to him. "Come in," he calls, making my eyes widen, and I try to pull away from him. "Alaricus." I hiss at him, my eyes wide, and he turns towards me, a soft smirk uplifting the corner of his plump red lips. "Yes, love?" he asks mockingly as a sweet-looking old woman opens up the door, not yet catching sight of us as she focuses on getting the trolley in smoothly. "Let go, this is inappropriate." I mumble to him from the corner of my mouth. "Holding my mate isn't inappropriate," he says, tugging me closer, and I stare at him for a moment, realizing he wouldn't let go. I pray that she won't notice us. Out clothes with soft colors, maybe we would just blend like little chameleons in a tree. But my praying goes to waste as she looks up, her eyes widening as she sees the way Alaricus holds me close to his chest. And to get back at me, Alaricus tugs me half onto his chest, and I bury my head into his chest, not wishing to be seen by the poor lady anymore. "Enjoy your meal," she says, her voice slightly shrill, before hurrying out, closing the door behind her. I hit my fist against Alaricus, just he lets out a soft chuckle. "Stupid, idiotic wolf man," I mumble to myself. "To my authentic scorner, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Still laughing, he yanks me, so I lay fully on his chest and cupping my face in his hand. He tilts my face up to look at him as I continue to mumble curses of him to myself rapidly. "I'm sorry, Angel," he whispers to me softly. "Don't be mad. Let's eat," he says softly, pressing a kiss to the side of my head as he whispers into my ear. Relenting, he presses kisses to my face, and I rest my hand onto his face, trying to push him away while trying to contain my giggles at his tactics. His arm loosens around me to lift me up. We walk towards the trolley, Alaricus unable to keep his hands off for even that long. He wraps the arm around my waist. I lift the covers off the dishes, a smile come into my face as I see the delicious-looking thyme ango curry and rice, along with some Caesar salad. We make plates for ourselves, and I grab the cheese, loading it onto my Caesar salad until it's nearly white. If I was going to eat salad, it had to at least have some risk of cholesterol involved. How was your week? Alaricus asks as we eat, his honey eyes curious, telling me a simple great wouldn't suffice. My overgrown wolf pup wanted details. It was great. I spent my time reconnecting with my parents. We watched our favorite family movies. Sadly, they pulled out the old photo albums, and it wasn't very fun, but they were laughing. I had a great time despite all the strange break-ins of the guards. Why did they do those anyway? I asked, curious. Throughout the week, the guards broke in at random times and had to find each family member and do a quick scan of the house before going back to their positions outside again. That was in case somebody had managed to get in and hold you guys captive. Perhaps you or your parents were being held at gunpoint and couldn't make any noise. They did those upon my orders. Alaricus says, and my eyes widened slightly as I frowned at him. That sounded slightly insane. Don't you think that's going a tad wee bit overboard? Any precaution can never be considered overboard. I'm a firm believer of better safe than sorry. Alaricus says, and I nod slowly. He was crazy. But then again, weren't all the best people. But his protectiveness needed to be pulled back a bit. But we could work on that later. What else did you do? Alaricus asks, and my face turns ashen as I remember what else I had done. I had never meant to hurt anyone, but I was a clumsy person, and sometimes that meant the people around me got hurt. It was why during school my friends refused to walk below me in the staircases. Alaricus looks at me suspiciously as he sees my expression, which I cover by stuffing cheese-covered salad into my mouth. Amara, what did you do? Nothing. I mumble. Amara, he says again, now sounding slightly worried. Well, first you need to know I didn't mean to. I say, my eyes widening in order to make sure he understands is serious. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He says slowly. I'm not entirely sure, but I may be a criminal. I say softly, hoping he doesn't hear. Love, I think I heard you wrong. Alaricus says. Okay, well, I didn't mean to at all, but I may have hit a police officer while he was on duty. I say, biting my lip as I watch his reaction. Alaricus' eyes widen in bewilderment. Have you by any chance heard of any news about Officer Jeffrey? I ask, voicing my concern for the police officer. I may have accidentally hit him with the door twice. I say softly, making his brows furrowed. As Alaricus looks at me confused. He was filling in for one of the guards, and I wasn't aware, so when he tried to come in for their random checks, I hit him with my door. And I think he was human because it hit him right in the face. But then he explained, so it was all right. I understood, and some other guards came in, but Jeffrey was slightly injured. I say, and Alaricus still looks bewildered. So how exactly did the second time happen? Well, he was bidding me good night, and you know how me and flat surfaces don't entirely get along. Alaricus was aware that I was most clumsy when there was absolutely nothing to trip on. My feet were very curly from the bottom, and I loved being barefoot. So when I walked Tess one times, I jammed the front of my foot into the ground and go crashing down to greet the floor face first. Well, I sort of tripped while walking on the flat floor, and while falling I tried to catch onto something but ended up holding onto the door as I fell. So I may have slammed the door into his face again. I say, frowning slightly. An odd expression takes over Alaricus' face as he bites his cheek from within. Only when a loud bark-like laugh escapes him, making me jump, do I realize he was trying to hold in his laughter. He was laughing at me. I let out a huff, angrily setting down my now empty plate. Alaricus grabs a hold of me, yanking me into his chest, shaking with laughter. Despite how beautiful and velvety his laugh was, it was rude. My little criminal. He mumbled into my ear, making my eyes widen. He pressed a sloppy kiss to the side of my face as he laughs, his whole body shaking as he rolls around on his bed, holding me within his arms. He's all right though, isn't he? I ask eagerly. I'm sure he is. I'll just make sure he gets a few days off. Don't worry, love, we won't let them put you behind bars just yet. Alaricus says, a small breathy laugh escaping him as he speaks. My crazy little angel. Alaricus whispers into my ear. Laying still now, his breath slowly rising and falling as I lay atop him. I try to roll off him, but he mumbles a sad little no that freezes me in his arms. His moods switch so quickly. Stay, he asks, carefully turning me over so that I faced him as I lay on top of his chest. We should get some sleep, I say softly. Please. I haven't seen you in a week. I'm not ready to let you go. He says softly. I need pajamas. You can borrow some of mine, he says, his eyes brightening, excitement and excitement, and I can't say no. He gets up, leading me to his closet, grabbing me a comfy-looking white hoodie with plain black pajama pants with a drawstring on them. His eyes aside as I part with him to change in the washroom. I quickly pull off my sweater and jeans, changing into the gigantic clothes. Despite how comfy they were, I looked like I was drowning in them. I looked absolutely ridiculous, but still I was excited to get back to Alaricus. Perhaps distance really did make the heart grow fonder. I walked out, seeing Alaricus sitting on the bed, only in plain grey pajama pants, my cheeks staining red as I realized he hasn't bothered to put a shirt on. He's in front of me before I caught my blush, his movements too quick for my human eyes to catch. I fiddle with the sleeves of the large sweater, adjusting it quickly as it drops, exposing my shoulder. He gazes at me silently for a moment, a near inaudible growl leaving his chest as his eyes trail over my small form submerged in his gigantic clothing. So beautiful, he mumbles softly, pressing a kiss to my shoulder softly, the neckline of his sweater veering off much too far to the sides for me. It was really big. How I had even jokingly said Alaricus was a small person seemed ridiculous to me right now. My little angel, he growls out softly, as he scoops me into his arms, carrying me carefully over to his large bed. His walk steady as if afraid to jostle me, as he stares down into my eyes, as if afraid that if he looked away I would disappear. I lay my hands on his chest and shoulder, a blush tinting my cheeks red as my cold hands touch his hot, smooth, velvety skin. He lays me down on the bed gently, carefully getting in behind me. I turn to face him as he wraps an arm around my waist, yanking me into his warm, large build. He was so warm and the night so cold. I snuggled into him, my cold skin pressing against his, making a small shiver pass through him as he looks down at me, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. Good night, angel, he says softly, his voice so husky and warm it makes me close my eyes to try to trap the sound within me forever. His arms wrapped around me tightly, holding my small form to his chest, with both arms wound tightly around me as if he wouldn't ever let go. And I knew he wouldn't. Our bodies seemed to mold together, leaving absolutely no room between us. Each curve and crevice pressed together. He was so warm and his scent so intoxicating that in my drowsy state, it in me snuggling my face into the crook of his neck, making his breath hitch as my lips skinned softly. I pressed a soft kiss to his throat, to reassure him I was right there, beside him, in his arms, as his arms tight and around me as if ensuring I wasn't going anywhere. And I wasn't. I couldn't, and never would I. Chapter 32. I fiddled with the hem of my soft grey sweater, trying to make it rest properly, sighing at myself in the mirror. I hadn't realized there were holes on the shoulders while purchasing it, but there was nothing I could do now. I'd never been ashamed of my lack of dating history. Dating hadn't appealed to me, not given the choice of potential partners. But now I cursed myself for it. Perhaps if I had dated I'd know what to do today. Alaricus had spoken to me after I'd escorted the heavily pregnant Victoria back to her room safely. She'd spent the night with me as Frank was being punished for laughing at her eating habits. The poor man had sulked around all day, throwing puppy-like forlorn glances at his beautiful fuming wife every time he ran into us. Poor Frank had only chuckled at her as she dipped pickles into peanut butter, asking how she could even eat such a thing and so much of it. Victoria, as sweet as she was, had a very short fuse, and her pregnancy hormonal imbalance was not helping her quick temper. Only after begging had Frank convinced his wife to come back to their room. Groveling levels that I didn't think possible were involved. As I'd made my way back to my room, Alaricus had intercepted. I was so tired after Talia all last night, I quite near walked right into him. And sadly, if I had, I also probably would have walked over him. A small smile had been on his face as he gazed down at me, his face the very picture of ease. But his eyes, his honey eyes spoke volumes. He was nervous. extremely excited and yet nervous. And it had the nerves building up in me too. Why would a man like Alaricus be nervous? I'd grabbed his hand in mine, wrapping my other atop of it, looking up at him, waiting for him to speak. Would you like to join me for? A small crow cleft his chest and he faltered, his eyes widening as he covers his mouth, frightened by his own noise. My brows furrow as I stare at him. Before, without my own consent, I burst into giggles. I tried to slap my hand over my mouth, and for a moment I'm glad nobody was in that hallway. We looked insane. Me with my hand over my face trying to suppress my giggles, and the almighty werewolf with his eyes wide and gigantic hand on his own face staring at his much smaller mate. Horrified. I'd never made a sound like that before. Alaricus says, and it only makes my giggles louder. His wide eyes crinkle sweetly as his own deep husky chuckle resonates throughout the hall. Would you like to go out with me tea tonight? Alaricus asks, and I smile at him, nodding my head, my heart filling with warmth. My dad had always told me if a man is very smooth around you, then he doesn't truly value you. If he did, you would make him nervous, he wouldn't deem himself worthy of you. If the guy stutters and is a bit of a mess, then he was definitely a keeper. I'll pick you up at 7, my love. Feel free to dress casually, he'd said, leaning down to press a kiss to my forehead before walking away. I raked my fingers through my thick chocolate brown hair, trying to fix it as best as I could with my fingers. I had had all necessities to do my hair besides the one probably most necessary, the skill to do so. At best I could straighten my hair, but I'd never liked straight hair on me. I thought it to be much too vanilla, always envying Marina for how great it looked on her. But she was absolutely stunning. I didn't particularly know what casual was to Alaricus, but I'd gone with a knitted sweater and jeans. But perhaps he'd meant a gown with no jewels. I would find out soon enough. There was only 30 seconds to 7. And according to my parents, if you were important to a man, he'd show up on time. He'd never keep you waiting. Mind games were fools and boys. A man in love treasures his partner and the time they could spend with them, not wanting to waste even a minute. A knock sounded at 7 exactly, my heartbeat increasing with each light rap of his knuckles. I swallowed nervously, grabbing my bag off the couch, pulling on my black long coat. It reached just below mid-thigh, and even it was wonderfully warm. I made my way to open the door. Upon opening it, I was met with the sight of Alaricus in a black sweater and black jeans. A black coat and button like mine lay atop broad shoulders, fitting his large form loosely. An adoring smile on his face, making the sweet dimple pop out. His honey gold eyes raking over me, taking in every detail. You look beautiful, my love, he whispered quietly, and I smiled up at him, nervously stepping out of the room. Are you ready to go? And I nodded. His large hand rested softly on the small of my back as he led me out. I have a little surprise for you. As much as I'd like to stay in with you, I'm sure you'd like a chance to get out of the palace, he says, leaning down to whisper it into my ear as we walk across the large door of the palace. The cool breeze blew against my skin ever so gently, whipping through my hair and making a smile come to my face. I loved the cold. Winter was my favorite season. Fall not far behind the blowing colorful leaves, the pumpkins near every doorstep. But there was something about snow. It was pure, held an ethereal beauty beyond comparison. The sweet, crisp, cold air of these seasons always put me in a good mood. I could feel my cheeks red and due to the cold, and I sniffled softly. Cyanide. Where will I be taking you tonight? A man said, bowing before him, making my brows raise. Nowhere, thank you, but I'll be driving my mate and I myself, Alaricus said, sternly outstretching his hand before the man, who quickly dropped keys into it. Good night, he bid us, and Alaricus nodded in acknowledgement as I tried to smile at the man to ease his discomfort. He seemed positively frightened. We walked towards the gigantic black SUV, his large hand grabbing a hold of mine softly, the warmth ever present. Alaricus held open my door for me, and I smiled at him in appreciation. He ensured I was tucked in safely before walking gracefully to his own side, sliding in. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, he asked with a boyish grin, his perfect white teeth sparkling, and I was tired to the point of being delirious. His breathtaking beauty wasn't helping my exhausted brain. I'd tried to take a nap, but my body refused to meet its own needs, and getting no sleep last night meant I was nearly a zombie on a date. I nodded, slightly dazed. "Where are we going?" I asked, turning to look at him as he backed us out of the large parkway. "Nope, you aren't getting that one out of me," he said, making me frown. We were taking the word surprise literally. Fantastic. Well, at least I like surprises. I closed my eyes, resting my head back on the comfortable headrest, exhaling deeply. The soft sounds of the traffic filled my ears. Alaricus, intoxicating scent filling my senses. I wasn't sure when I had associated that scent with safety, but at some point I had. Now that sense of safety had my head lolling to the side as I lost my fight to exhaustion, surrendering pitifully. I wasn't completely sure how long it had been since I quite basically knocked out, but an arm was wrapped around my waist firmly, tugging me gently. My head leaned against a warm, hard surface. My eyes opened wryly as I was plopped onto something firm, cocooned in warmth. My eyes lazily scanned my surroundings, until my brain caught up with my vision. 2 large black leather seats were before me, the keys still in ignition, the windshield wipers occasionally wiping the windshield as light rain drizzled across it. I tried to sit up, but 2 large arms wrapped around me firmly, pulling me back into my previous position. Alaricus shushed me soothingly, and I craned my neck to see him looking down at me. His large muscled arms were wrapped tightly around my waist. As he lay back on the huge black seat, my body draped across his large form, his long legs intertwined with mine, my head resting on his chest. "Sleep, my love. You're exhausted. We both could use a nap. We will get to dinner right after," he said softly into my ear, pressing a kiss to the side of my throat where he gently pushed my hair away, his large rough fingers leaving a scorching trail behind. I stretched slightly in his hold, turning around so that I could see him face clearly. I wrapped my arms around his strong waist, snuggling my face into his large broad chest, rubbing my cold nose against the warm skin exposed above the collar of his sweater. A hot shiver raked through him, and he clenched his hands at my sides, before wrapping them around my hips, holding me firmly onto him. "Sleep, my love," he whispered, and I smiled softly, resting, still closing my eyes again. I wasn't particularly sure what I dreamed about, and perhaps it was the reason behind me waking up content. Unlike my usual bewildered, grumpy state, Alaricus sat peacefully beneath me, my very own firm but heated pillow with velvety soft skin. His dark lashes lay gently against the tops of his cheeks, his red plump lips parted ever so slightly, his arms tight around me even in his slumber. He was a sight to behold. I lay my head back into his chest, his heart beating steadily in his chest. "Since when have you been awake?" he asked softly, his voice huskier after his nap. I looked up at him and he pulled me up so that we were face to face. "Not long, only a few minutes," I answer, "ready for dinner." And he shakes his head, wrapping his arms tighter around me. "I happen to be quite content here, but if you're hungry we could always order in," he says softly, resting his cheek on my head. "In the car?" I ask slowly. I'd been in his position before, too bewildered to realize where I was upon waking up. I understood perfectly. He nodded and my eyes widened. He knew we were in the car, he was just a tad bit loony. We aren't ordering into a car. And in no way am I allowing some poor man who only wishes to do his job to stumble upon us, when we are in a compromising position such as this. I finish off awkwardly, trying to sound stern. "Baby, this isn't even close to compromising. But we could certainly make it so," he says huskily, his arms trailing over my sides softly, and I squeak embarrassingly, fumbling to get off his chest. A chuckle escapes him before he flips us over, his arm encasing me underneath him. "I was merely letting you know this wasn't compromising, my love. No need to take drastic measures," he says, pressing a kiss to my cheek softly. I'm a little hungry," I say, swallowing nervously. "As am I," he says, his voice deeper than usual, his honey eyes glinting with gold, making me think he was speaking of a different kind of hungry than I was. "Then we should do something about that, shouldn't we?" I say, trying to lighten the mood. "I thought you'd never ask," he says, leaning down towards me. "I meant the food," I squeak out. As his lips attach to the skin of my jaw, he trails leisure kisses over it, trailing down to the base of my throat, his tongue flicking over the indentation softly. As you wish. He mumbles against my skin, inhaling deeply before wrapping his arms around me to right us so that we sat together upright on the seat. He opens the door, sliding out, holding his hand out for me. I grab onto it, making my way out. We stand before a tiny but adorable restaurant. Light, nearly freezing rain drizzling down upon us. Alaricus grabs onto my hand running through the rain, and I laugh following along with him. He holds the door open for me and I duck in, feeding him right behind me. Sire, you finally made it. A man says suddenly, and I nearly jump out of my skin, whirling around to look at the chubby man that stands before us. A chef's hat on his head, a towel draped over his arm. Come sit. I've cleared out the entire restaurant for you. He says, his accent's light and nearly indescribable. And she is the one. And Alaricus nods, proudly wrapping his arm around my waist. She's my mate. Alaricus says, beaming down at me. Bella, it is so nice to meet you. The man says, warmly offering a hand to me, and I shake it firmly with a smile of my own. It's very nice to meet you too. I hope you like it here. I cook mainly Italian, but I'm old enough to know my way around the others too. Feel free to order off the menu, he says to us both. Walking off, and Alaricus pulls out a chair for me, helping me out of my jacket and tucking me in once I've sat down. I smile at him in appreciation as he takes his own seat across from me on the little table. The restaurant is absolutely adorable but empty. It still holds a warmth, a cozy feeling that makes me wish to come here again and again. I skim over the menu, reading the short descriptions to understand some of the authentic Italian dishes. Although true to his word, many other cultures seem to linger on the pages as well. Have you decided? I ask Alaricus, and he shakes his head. Have you? No, it all looks great. I can't decide. Could I make a suggestion? He asks, and I nod. The first time I'd stumbled upon here, I got my chef's special pizza and the spaghetti. It was one of the best meals I'd ever had. If you'd like, we could get those and share. Alaricus says. That's perfect. Could I start you all off with some drinks? The man says, repairing much too silently at our table for his size. I'd like a soda, please. Alaricus says. And for you, lovely lady? He asks, his accent coming on thicker with his LS. The same for me, please. I say, and he nods, bowing. Our drinks are in front of us in moments, and he's taking our order, promising me I'd love it. Do you like it here? It's not very fancy, but I guessed you'd like it. You do tend to like the simpler things, but if you don't, we can still go elsewhere. Alaricus says. No, I love it here. I'm not a huge fan of fancy places. I say, and Alaricus nods, grabbing my hand softly over the table. I'm glad you do. The food arrives just a few minutes later, the pizzas as on a large metal tray, and a gigantic plate of spaghetti sat right between us. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. If you need anything, just let me know, he says, waking off to the back. Dig and love, Alaricus says, and I carefully lift out a slice of pizza. I bite down into it, my eyes closing as the melted cheese hits my taste buds, along with the very subtly tangy tomato sauce. It had a dark pepperoni on it, along with green peppers. It's beef pepperoni, Alaricus clarifies. It's delicious, I say, finishing my slice quickly before reaching for another. Alaricus whirls some spaghetti around a fork before holding it up to my lips, urging me with his eyes to take it. I wrap my lips around the fork, taking the offered spaghetti. And it was just as good. It was filled with cheese, and the tangy, slightly spicy tomato sauce was absolutely delicious. It seemed every item here was mouth-watering. Even the soda seemed better than usual. Are you done, love? Or should I order something else you have barely eaten? Alaricus asks. 2 wolves, a quarter of a pizza, and half a plate of spaghetti was barely eaten, but to the rest of us it was more than adequate. No, I'll survive, I say, smiling to myself, and Alaricus brows furrow as he stares at me. Let's order another pizza, he says, hurriedly going to call for the chef, but I slap my hand over his face. I was being sarcastic. I'm so full I can barely move. Perfect. I can carry you, Alaricus says. I was slightly worried if I ever slipped into a coma or lost feeling in my legs he'd be ecstatic. Barely move. I still can a little. Don't worry, I'll make it, I say, and his red plump lips form a pout, as he frowns to himself. Emmanuel the chef comes out of the back room raising a brow in confusion at the pouting man-child that sat across from me. Is everything all right? Do we need anything here? He asks cautiously. No, everything was great, just the bill please, I say, impressed at my own ability to speak to him without making a fool of myself the way I usually did at restaurants. The bill's been taken care of, my lovely miss. Now you guys can be off, the promise of coming back. We will, Alaricus says, shaking Emmanuel's hand as I pull on my coat. I hold out mine to do the same, but Emmanuel grabs it, bending to place a kiss on it, but Alaricus yanks me away by the waist before he has the chance to. Oh, would you look at the time? He says, quite basically carrying me out only through the arm he has around my waist. By Emmanuel, I call, trying to ease the poor old chef's nerves and distract him from the freak show taking place in front of him. What are you doing? I ask, pressing my lips together as I feel him dig his face in between my shoulder blades. Reveling in the scent of my beautiful mate. He replies, No, you're acting like a crazy caveman, I say in a clipped tone, trying to hold in my shriek as he nuzzles his nose into my skin. I was freakishly ticklish at times. I couldn't even wear a turtleneck. Am I? He asks quietly. Yes, I respond, in a whisper. Something had changed in him suddenly, I didn't know what. Something flicked off on. Something entirely darker than the Alaricus I'd been with all night. Something else. If being so deeply obsessed with the woman you love that you can't bear somebody else getting too close, or inhaling her delicious scent is caveman-like, then I'm the worst of them all. I want you to be mine. Mine and mine alone. Never do I wish to share you, and forever will I cherish you. Forever will I try to get so lost within you that nothing else makes sense. I want to surround myself with you until there is nothing of me left. Now, if that is wrong, then forgive me, love, for I'm a sinner, he says, turning me around to face him. My hands rest on his shoulders as he lowers me down slowly, every inch of me pressing against him as I slide down the hard planes of his large form. The angel trapped with a sinner, trapped with the very devil himself. But I promise you, angel, nobody can love you like I can. Never will there be another who will feel for you the way I do. Only a tainted soul can love this way. Nothing pure can love so devotedly God if on one hand stands their beloved and on the other the very well-being of the world itself. A sinner will always choose their beloved. The devil will destroy the world, so it's no longer an option to choose anything else. In that moment he looked like a devil. Not the kind with horns and a little red tail, but the enticing kind. The one that could get you to do their bidding. Make you a slave and you wouldn't even know how to disobey. I could love him so easily. Fall into all the passion and love he offered effortlessly. It would be like breathing. Only within the dark's embrace can the light shine at its brightest. Only a devil can cherish an angel. Protect it. Because he is selfish and wants the angel forever, he would net any harm befall his angel. Never will I let any harm befall you. Hand yourself over to me, angel, without a worry. I wouldn't dare taint your light. Never would I let anyone else. I'd end them before they could get close to what's mine. I've handed myself over to you and found the most peace that I've had in years. Bathe me in your light, diminish the darkness within. Take over me entirely. How I wish for you to consume my very being. What a beautiful end that would be, lost within the very enthralless of the one I hold above all else. My beloved, my angel, my light. To my agent extraordinaire, my noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Those honey eyes glint dangerously with the promise of a passion unlike all else. Never had I thought gold could be so dark, but the one that glints within his eyes holds love so powerful it couldn't possibly be good. It was all-consuming, overbearing. I didn't know how one man could feel so deeply. Didn't deem it possible. How could one hold so much within, without shattering? That's what his love was for me. Shattering, consuming, overbearing. I couldn't breathe when his eyes were on me. Perhaps he took away the very meat. I held his strings, the very strings to the devil, but I didn't know how to pull them. I didn't know, and neither did I wish to learn. I didn't wish to hand over to him my very being, but I didn't know if it was possible now. To stop the devil, he had engraved himself within me. I was slowly becoming his, slowly but surely, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. Snow falls around us, little flakes getting caught in our hair resting softly on the material of our dark coats. The white flakes only lighting the contrast between my chocolate waves and the black coat I adorn. He leans down slowly, cupping my face within his large hands, his eyes flickering from my lips to meet my gaze. Back and forth, apprehension in his eyes, hunger, want, the deepest of desires, overwhelming love, the darkest of passion. The soft light of the street lamp shines down on him, and he's so beautiful in that moment, too beautiful to be called an angel. Angels can't be so beautiful that they would make you want to sin. He has to be the devil, but his honey eyes glint so sweetly, beckoning me forwards the most tantalizing of sugars. His plump red lips softly press against mine and my eyes flutter shut. They hold an incomparable warmth, mold so perfectly against my own. His arm wounds its way around my waist, pulling me into him as he angles my face upwards to deepen his sweet torment. Lips move softly together, an unyielding desire, an overwhelming need. He was consuming me, but so was I him. His lips are so soft as they urge mine gently. I wrap my arms around his neck, letting my fingers get lost within his dark soft strands. I pull on his hair softly, a husky groan escaping him, getting lost within my mouth. His mouth opens, biting onto my bottom lip gently. Both his arms encase my waist, my every crease and crevice pressing against his. It was difficult to decipher where I ended and where he began, but I didn't wish to know. I wanted to stay intertwined with him for eternity. What a sweet end it would be, but perhaps with him an ending wasn't necessary. Even death was afraid of him. He could chase it away too if he come after me. His tongue darts over my lips, until they part, allowing us to taste the very essence of the other. He was intoxicating my very brand of intoxication, my favorite. I'd never been drunk, but I imagined kissing Alaricus would be quite close, perhaps even more. The need for oxygen becomes dire, and I press my hands against his large chest, pulling away slowly, but maybe a piece of me stayed with him. I love you, he says quietly. I inhale deeply, biting down into my lips, staring up at him. An uncontrollable smile on my face, my cheeks colored not only from the cold but from his gaze, from his touch. A part of me longed to say it back, to see his eyes light up, to see those lips curve up, that dimple pop out, to see him happy, but I didn't know if what I felt was enough. I wouldn't say it till I was sure, for he deserved nothing less. He wouldn't give me anything less, so neither would I him. I lean up to press my lips softly against his, chastely, a simple display of the affection I felt for him. Nothing more, nothing less. His arms wound around my waist once more as I pull away, and he leans down with a smile to nuzzle his nose against mine. My little angel, to my agent extraordinaire, mythical, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He mumbles, to my agent extraordinaire, mythical, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Chapter 33. His arms await me as I run into them, the dark green maxi I adorn trailing behind me. His arms wrap tightly around my waist as I collide into him, soft warm lips pressing a sweet kiss to my hair. I missed you, I mumble softly into his chest. Not more than I missed my angel. Alaricus mumbles gently into my hair, pulling me even closer into him, but for some reason today it simply wasn't enough. I wanted to be even closer. It was an unrelenting urge. In just a few hours a deep yearning for him had formed within me, nearly making my legs tremble beneath me. The alphas and their mates had visited today, but sadly apart from dinner the alphas had speaking with Alaricus, while I'd gone with all the mates and attempted to enjoy their company. This had happened upon the request of the mates, wanting to speak with each other away from their alpha mates for just a little bit. If anyone had tried to argue, the pregnant mates had sent them a glare so vicious they'd immediately found themselves unable to speak. The few pregnant mates were the focus of the event, and their mates rushed in periodically to check up on them, growling at the male mates that sat amongst us. Wolves went a bit crazier than usual when their mate was pregnant. Everything seemed a threat. Their protective instincts were so high it was nearly suffocating to witness. I'd murder Alaricus if he even attempted to act that way when I was pregnant. I'd quite literally end up murdering him in cold blood, and then be distraught. But that would happen after. My cheeks had reddened as I caught my train of thought, and an alpha's mate, sweet boyish Nathan, had immediately become concerned for me. Of course, somehow hearing his distress, his mate Alpha Lily had come barreling in. So many alphas in one place was a bit chaotic, especially when their mates were so close. But apparently me and Alaricus were both a bit of control freaks and great at handling each of our separate dilemmas. We'd managed to get everything settled and calm on each of our sides, probably by different means, but we'd managed just fine. I nibbled on my lips, often contemplating whether I should do it or not, but the urge grew to the point where I had no control. I pulled away from him slightly, hesitantly grabbing his face into my hands. I leaned forward, my eyes flickering up to meet his own, a fair warning to him. As my lips touch his, I can't fight, ever even pondered over not kissing him. His lips are so gentle against mine, and yet a hunger lies just beneath the surface, one he doesn't hide from me. It only makes my yearning for him grow. His arm wraps tighter around my waist as he lifts me off my feet a bit so he can properly reach my lips. He lightly nudges my face up, deepening the collision of our lips, his tongue trailing over my lips, meeting my own as my lips part lightly under his sweet onslaught of pleasure. He tastes every crevice of my mouth, not leaving anything behind, his hand trailing softly from the top of my shoulder to the very bottom of my hip. Our lips part as the need to breathe grows dire. My chest rises and falls rapidly, my lips slightly swollen and parted as I stare at him, my cheeks flushing slightly at the blatant desire in his honey golden gaze. His honey eyes were only accentuated by the all-black suit he had on, the taunt smooth skin a sweet contrast. He looked absolutely exotic. He was breathtaking. I'd seen the eyes of females traveling over his large muscled build before their eyes had widened, and they turned away quickly. Rightly so. He wasn't theirs to stare at. I didn't think anyone could possibly love anyone as much as I love you. I don't think anyone ever has, nor will they ever. Nobody has you. He murmurs gently, and my eyes water slightly at his words, my chest constricting. I was a tad bit over-emotional these days, and Alaricus was just a bucket of sweetness most of the time. "Why are you crying, angel?" Alaricus mumbles as a tear falls from my trailing gently down the length of my soft pale cheek. "Did somebody say something?" he asks, his eyes hardening. "No, I promise nobody did," I say, wiping at my tears with the back of my hand in frustration. Alaricus gently grabs a hold of my wrist, resting my hand onto his chest, instead rubbing his own large warm thumb under my eyes to collect my tears. "Has everybody left?" Fumbling with the buttons on his black dress shirt. "Yes, my love, they have," he says, his eyes growing mischievous. "We have the palace to ourselves," he says, groaning playfully, leaning down and throwing me over his shoulder. A loud squeak leaves me as my feet are lifted off the beautiful stable ground beneath. The ground gets further as he stands back up. My, was he tall. "Alaricus," I say, laughing, hitting my fist onto his solid muscled back through the dark suit he had on his shoulder, ticking my stomach. "Yes, darling," he asks nonchalantly, as if he didn't have me thrown over his shoulder like a caveman. "Put me down," I say, attempting to sound stern. "I really don't want to," Alaricus says, and I huff in anger cue. I say, making him chuckle. I wasn't Spanish, but I loved languages, and my mom always indulged in my lingual curiosities, trying her best to teach me a little bit of every language she herself could get her hands on. I hadn't ever gotten that type of response from him before. "Well, now you're going to get it." I really didn't want to do this. "Do what?" he asks, chuckling. I inhale deeply. He was about to regret his words. In fact, he was about to nibble on them, meekly, while crying in the corner. Gathering up all my strength, I try to remember what every action movie had taught me. Don't put your thumb in your fist, it'll break. And put your whole body into it. Well, the second part was gotta be hard since I was currently hanging limply over the back of a giant lunatic. I throw my fist into the bottom of his hard back, regretting my decision immediately. But I hold back my wince. Was that it? He asks, and I groan out a quiet yes, mooring my injured hand. What type of lunatic decides to punch the alpha above all alphas? Of course me. Chuckles rake through him, effectively shaking me as well, as if he were rubbing my failure in. I rest my head onto his back as comfortably as I can manage. My struggles were futile, the brute wasn't even shaken. My eyes widen as the holes begin to get very familiar. We were in the holes of our rooms. But he just walked right past mine. My legs kick as I struggle to get away, but his arms only tighten. I let go of the last shred of dignity I have left and do the only thing I can think of. Desperate times call for very desperate measures. I bite him. A low growl escapes him as he drops me onto his gigantic bed. His eyes almost completely gold. He pounced on top of me, wrapping his arms tightly around me. His next words have my eyes widening as the few circumstances in which I'd met him seem to flash before me. Did mate try to mark us? A deep husky voice asks. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I breathe out, my breath getting caught in my throat at his enthralling golden gaze. Mate tried to mark Eros. He says, a soft smile on his face as he lays above me. Mate wants Eros. He mumbles softly, the gold in his eyes melting to the sweetest hues. Mate is so beautiful. Eros's breath is taken away every time he looks at Mate. His large warm hands trailing softly over my bare shoulders. The dress had been strapless, and apparently that was something that not only Alaricus but Eros too was thrilled about. Mate looks so beautiful today. Eros was about to kill the alphas that stare at Mate. Eros's mate. He says, his lush red lips jutting out in a childish pout. An absolute contrast to his words. Mate tried to mark Eros. Mate wants to make Eros hers. Eros is yours, Mate. Is Mate Eros's? He asks, looking at me through his lashes. Yes, I say, softly nodding. A large dimpled grin breaks out onto his face that makes my heart melt. Eros loves Mate so much. He mumbles, running his nose against mine gently. He sits back, wrapping his arms around me and scooping me into his lap, cocooning me into him. The soft silk of my deep green dress forms a halo around our laps. Eros buried his face into my neck, inhaling deeply. He presses a kiss to my throat, nipping at the skin softly. I crouch away from him, giggling. A smile spreads on his face as he grabs me back, burying his face into the crook of my neck, pressing kisses all over it. As I shriek with laughter, I was highly ticklish. Stop it, Eros. I giggle out. Pay the price. He demands, puckering up his lips at me. I quickly peck his lips, and his smile drops as he pouts at me sadly. That wasn't a kiss. He complains. Mate doesn't love Eros. Mate won't kiss Eros. He mumbles to himself sadly. Refusing to meet my eyes, he looks down into his lap. No, baby, you can have however many kisses as you want, I promise. I say, cupping his face into my hands. I angle to press my lips deeply into his, hecking him numerous times, and a wild laugh escapes him, his eyes glowing with delight. Eros happy, but Mate has to keep kissing Eros. He adds on, quickly widening his golden eyes for dramatic effect. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I say, biting into my lip. To suppress, I'll often lean forward to press my lips to his again, pressing one to his nose as well. Mate will never leave Eros? He asks, biting into his lush bottom lip. Never, I answer. Even when Mate finds out what Eros has done. He asks, uncertainty clouding his once bright eyes. My brows furrow as I struggle to understand why he was acting this way. What had Eros done? Sweet puppy like Eros. But my long silence means something entirely different to Eros. His large gold eyes shine with unshed tears as he turns his face away from me. Gently setting me down on the bed, he turns away from me. No one can love Eros. Eros is so bad. He whimpers softly. Mate will never love Eros. Mate will leave Eros. Then we will be alone again. His whole large form trembles as he speaks. No, Eros, I'm so sorry. I won't ever leave you no matter what. He peeks up at me, from behind his shoulder before shuffling to face me again, searching my face for any sign of a lie. When he finds none, he scoops me back into his arms. Eros, sorry for doubting mate. Mate is just so beautiful and kind. Eros worries you will be scared of us. He explains. Why would I be scared? No reason. He mumbles, peppering kisses over my face. To my agent extraordinaire, my Lindolben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Why would I be scared? I ask again, placing my hands onto his large blazer-clad shoulders. Eros crazy. Mate doesn't need to worry. We tell mate everything later. Not important. Please. He mumbles softly to me, looking up at me through his thick black lashes as he sees me about to protest. And I nod, allowing him to peacefully rest his cheek onto my head. I rake my fingers through his hair and his body seems to hum gently in a purr. Is Eros purring? I asked easily, and I feel him shake his head rapidly. Eros was purring. I say again, and he pulls away from me, growling out a no. His face set into a glare. His red plump lips jutting out stubbornly. Eyes fixated on me. Eros doesn't purr. Eros isn't a kitten. He mumbles angrily, and I press my lips together to keep from laughing. Eros was a kitten. Eros doesn't want to be my sweet little kitten. I ask, feigning sadness, and his eyes widen as he shakes his head, before nodding and then going back to shaking. Eros wants to protect mate. Eros is mate's big bad wolf, not silly little kitty. He mumbles, and one of the hardest things I'd ever done was not laugh as this gigantic alpha wolf before me mumbled my new favorite words. Silly little kitty. I bite the inside of my cheek, looking downward into my lap. I swallow thickly, pretending to sniffle. No, mate, no cry. He says hurriedly, pulling me into his chest, wrapping his large arms around me. Eros will be mate's kitten. Eros will be whatever mate wants. Eros promises. He says, and I smile at him, pecking his lips, making him smile. Okay. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I say, watching his smile drop, but he nods, shrugging to himself. Eros, kitty. Kitty Eros. He mumbles under his breath, trying to get used to the idea. But his nose scrunched immediately in distaste, and he shakes his head to rid of the thought. I strain to hear it, unable to contain my giggles as I do, seeing the gigantic muscled man sitting before me, who just happened to be about 3 times my size. Agree to be my kitten was impossible not to laugh at. His head tilts as he nibbles on his lower lip in confusion, looking more like an adorable wolf pup than any grown man well over 6 feet. His golden eyes widen, suddenly realization filling them. Mate tricked Eros. He says, his jaw nearly falling out of its rightful place. The tiny little angel almost tricked Eros. He says to himself, horrified. Can Eros forgive me? I ask, cupping his face into my hands, rubbing my thumb over the light stubble on his cheeks. And he snuggles into my touch, before realizing what he was doing and stiffening. Well, only if mate promises Eros an endless amount of kisses. Eros can kiss mate always. And I sigh, if that was what it took. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I mumble sulkily. He was really going to take advantage of this one. Oh, okay. He stutters out, and I nod. Eros can just kiss mate whenever Eros wants. He asks in wonder, and my eyes twitches, but I nod. A huge smile takes over his face, and he pounces onto me, attacking my face with kisses, making sure he doesn't do any injustice to any part of my face. He doesn't even leave one spot on my face, and touched his lips are everywhere. Eros loves mate. He shouts out loudly, and I shush him, slapping my hand onto his face, my eyes widening. The crazy puppy was going to make us the talk of the palace. Many of the helps stayed in the palace. Guards were in place even at night. While the others slept, they were sure to hear, although the others probably did too. His eyes fill with mischief as he puckers his lips, kissing my hand, before darting his tongue out and licking at my scratch my nose, immediately removing my hand to his suit. Loud laughs escape him as he tugs me into his chest, nuzzling his nose against mine. Mate is Eros and Alaricus, little angel. We will never let anything harm our mate. We are going to love mate so much mate will never want to leave us. Mate will stay with us forever, he says, sighing softly in content. I mumble in agreement, and he hums happily, pressing a quick kiss to my lips again. Mine forever, he says, thrilled by the idea. Eros presses his lips gently to mine. Mine, he mumbles, crushing me to his large form, inhaling my scent deeply. Alaricus won't let Eros stay, he says to me, pulling away from me slightly, his eyes widening in panic. I caress his face gently. It's okay, baby, I'm right here always. You can come out again soon, okay? I promise I'll force Alaricus to let you out. He nods happy, pressing his lips deeply to mine, biting onto my lower lip gently. Eros loves mate, he whispers to me softly before then his eyes gives way to the sweet honey. Sleep with me tonight, Alaricus asks, looking at me though his lashes and I suppress a smile. They were both so alike. It wasn't often that we spoke of Eros. At times I wondered if Alaricus was even conscious throughout my time with Eros. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I mumble softly, pressing my lips to his, softly going to pull away, but he holds me to him, gently pressing his lips to mine again, trailing his tongue over my bottom lip before pulling away. You promised we could have as many kisses as we want, he says, his lips curving up into a smirk, his dimple popping out. I think that even if somebody ran him over with a bulldozer only to reverse and run over him again, he'd still hear that one. The man was insatiable. I was on the verge of buying him a teddy bear to kiss. That promise was to Eros. I mumble to him, making his smirk drop. That's not fair. He grumbles out and I giggle, pressing a kiss to the very place in which the dimple had been. The jummis, I ask, and he nods, getting up but grabbing me into his arms to carry me into his closet before I can do the same. He was starting to make a habit of carrying me everywhere, and as nice as it was, I was going to have to break the habit. Maybe I just do it tomorrow. Is this okay? He asks me softly, motioning with his chin towards a white button up, and I shrug slightly. He places a kiss on my cheek, grabbing a hold of clothes self and setting me down. He makes his way out of the closet, closing the door behind him softly. I unzip my long silk maxi, and it pulls at my feet. I step out of it, carefully laying it onto a chair. I slip on the white shirt. The size difference between me and Alaricus was large, I knew, but the shirt nearly reached my knees. I was average height for a woman. I'd never felt so small. To think just a few months ago, when I turned 18, how old I'd felt. A small smile crept onto my face as I remembered the way Alaricus had snuck into my room at midnight, cocooning me in his warm embrace. He peppered my face with kisses until I'd woken up. Happy birthday, love, he'd mumbled, and I'd hummed softly, snuggling further into his warmth and falling back asleep, only able to mumble a quick thank you. His husky chuckle had rung in my ears as I'd fallen asleep, only to hear it again in my dreams. I hadn't expected for him to get me anything or even know my birthday, but he'd somehow known. It was one of the best birthdays I'd ever had. Despite my reluctance to accept, he'd gotten me the best gift of all, a package of the books I'd been pining to read, along with pajamas and mugs for my tea addiction. Our bouquet of deep red roses had sat neatly in my bedside for days after my birthday, and I was reluctant to throw it out even 2 weeks later. But one of the cleaning staff had accidentally. Alaricus' pants never seemed to be able to stay up on me, and the shirt was very long. Perhaps it was all right. I nibble nervously on my lip as I swing the door open, looking at the floor instead of up at him, but I could feel his heated gaze trained on me. My angel, he murmurs ever so softly. I almost don't even hear it. I look up at him through my lashes to meet his darkened gaze. You're so beautiful, he mumbles softly, and I let my chocolate waves fall onto my face to cover my blush. But he doesn't seem to like that. He's right in front of me before I have the chance to move away, his finger under my chin softly nudging my face up, so he could see it again. Don't hide from me, Amara. I've spent far too long without you, he says softly, leaning down to pick me up into his arms. I rest my hand onto his shoulder, one finding its way onto his heartbeat. his bare scorching skin heating up my cold skin pleasantly. His chest is so firm, his tanned smooth skin taut over large muscles. I rest my face onto his chest, meeting his warm gaze with my own. I yawn softly, cuddling further into his warm build. Today had been a long day. He lays me down onto his bed, gently ensuring I'm comfy under the covers before laying down beside me. His arms reaching out for me, instinctively he wraps me into his embrace, nuzzling me softly. I lost control. That hasn't happened in years. Centuries, actually. He says softly, and my eyes fly open as I look up at him, propping my face up on my hand that before rested on his chest. It's been so long since Beeville to take control over me that way. Without the help of the full moon, you make me lose control. But you also tame me. How is that possible? He asks me, and I stare at him wide-eyed. You bring out my demons, but instead of them damning my angel to hell, you bathe them in your light. And they, those helpless fools, they dance to your every whim. They stand still in your trance. How they giggle along with you. He says, smiling at me softly, his honey eyes so warm. It depends on who's judging. They may be demons to you. To me they're just led astray, perhaps even just misunderstood. Blinking up at him sleepily. Maybe that's part of why I love you. You're the only one who doesn't see me as a beast. You see me as me. Just me. Alaricus. And no one has looked at me as if I were just us so long. I can barely even remember what that used to be like anymore. He says, brushing away a dark strand of my hair that had fallen onto my face. To me you will always be Alaricus. Just Alaricus. My Alaricus. I mumble, hugging him to me tightly. My beauty. The beast's beauty. He murmurs to himself, and I press my eyes shut, holding him to me tightly, and we fall asleep that way. Wrapped up in one another. Both a little unsure. Both a little scared, but both together.